NRDC's initiative, Rewrite the Future, is about understanding Hollywood's reluctance to tell climate stories and about working with creative professionals to overcome it. We want to encourage and support a revolution of climate storytelling in film and TV that will change our cultural narrative about the crisis. Because right now we're telling ourselves all the wrong stories, that climate change is not that urgent, or that it's not even real, that it's too expensive or too big to fix, or that it's already too late, and other fairy tales that invite complacency. We need a new climate narrative that will help us face reality, confront our fear and our grief, help us imagine better futures, and inspire us to action. And now I'm very pleased to introduce Entertainment Weekly's editor-in-chief, J.D. Heyman.
So good, effective activism is really just good storytelling, and I'm very fortunate to have two of the best storytellers around with me to talk about how we can rewrite our future environmentally and make the world a little bit better. Gina Mccarthy is the president and CEO of the NRDC, one of the most respected environmental organizations in the Milky Way galaxy. She also was the EPA administrator under President Barack Obama, and her work in environmental policy goes back to Massachusetts, where she worked with an up-and-coming politician named Mitt Romney and many others. Her thinking on this subject and her idealism is an inspiration to us all. Come on up, Gina. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is one of the many up-and-coming actors who are hoping to get a big break here at Sundance. We're rooting for her. She has a great film here called Downhill, and it's kind of amazing that there's actually a downhill ski run right on top of us. Julia is also, in addition to being a talented producer, creator, actor, comic, you name it, she's also walked the walk in her environmental beliefs, going way, way back. She's a board member of NRDC and a real idealist when it comes to making change. Come on up, Julia. So I thought we'd start this conversation by talking a little bit about despair, which is my favorite topic. But I think it's important because we're at a point in our discourse, in our politics, where people talk about these issues, that they feel powerless. And I know that you don't feel that way. But when I think of my own childhood, I remember vaguely people talking about the Cuyahoga River catching on fire and how that was a galvanizing moment that led to the creation of the agency that you led to the modern environmental movement in this country, and that was one river in one state in one industrial accident, as opposed to an entire subcontinent catching on fire, and everything that we see around us that doesn't seem to create the same kind of energy. So why don't we start, Gina, by talking about how you do it and how you stay hopeful, how this is not a moment to despair.
Well, first of all, thank you for doing this. Yeah, I forget that I didn't have a microphone on. Thank you for doing this, and Julia and I just wanted to correct one thing you said. NRDC isn't one of the most respected; it is the most respected. That was just one slight correction.
As I was saying that, I felt
yeah, you screwed
a
up.
lot of hostility coming at me. Well, we'll just kind of muddle through now in my mortification.
Well, I kind of was around when the Cuyahoga River caught fire. I was around swimming in Boston Harbor when it was filled with oil and other things that you don't want to hang around with. And I look at all the improvements we've made since then, and it gives me hope for what we can do in the future. Look, I am a 65-year-old feisty Irish woman. If you think this administration is going to make me despair, you got another thing coming.
Nice.
It's going to make me fight. And it's going to make me tell them that they're not going to win. We're going to win. And really, NRDC is all about fighting all of the rollbacks that are happening, and they've sued this administration 100 times, and they've won over 90% of those, so that's not a bad record, better than any grade I ever got in college. And so I also know that what they're doing is not consistent with what most people want. You know, people care about the world we live in. They want clean air and they want clean water. And I think today is all about trying to change the dynamic of how people think and feel about climate change. I think we've sort of missed the boat in talking about, you know, too much about glaciers and devastation, which is true, it's happening now, but we have to talk about solutions. We have to talk about hope. Nobody follows losers, and I don't think we want to be that. So this, you know, folks that want to bring us down and tell us we can't do it, we're just going to tell him no. We're going to tell them that we are going to do it. We're going to talk about the things we can do in our everyday life. We're going to personalize the issue of climate change, which is what our effort to rewrite the future is all about. I'm changing the messaging, and we have to too. We're going to win this. We have things we can do. We're going to start organizing ourselves. We're going to stop listening to 24-hour news cycles that depress us, and we're going to start thinking about what we need to do for our family and their future. That's what we're going to do together, and that's what I think NRDC is poised to do, and what my life has been all about. So we are going to win this damn thing, and no one's going to take us down. That's it.
Gina McCarthy, the next president of the United States, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, you can get your buttons for Gina McCarthy for president.
There are
or
going to
whatever
be
you want
some
over there.
people in the audience with envelopes coming around, so feel free. Julia,
What?
well, that was it. I mean, I think we're all ready to go now. One of the challenges about storytelling in this space is that I think there's a particular narrative, which is, you know, that you cannot educate people about these issues without depressing them. And I don't think that's true, clearly. Gina doesn't think that's true. You now, I mean, obviously you have a nice arrangement with Apple. You're going to be producing a lot of stuff. You've got the reins to make content. Do you think about how you can direct the conversation in an entertaining and productive way in this space?
Yeah, I think the key is to tell stories that people can connect to on a personal level, so they don't feel as if they're being lectured to or talked down to, needless to say, and that the agenda, if there is one, let us say it's an environmental agenda of sorts, is not in the forefront of things. It can sort of be the undercurrent of a very strong story. And I think that if people identify with character and the behavior of these characters, that you've got them. You have them. You know, I think the film Dark Water, for example, is a fine example of that. And that's just one.
Right.
Yeah.
In terms of your experience, Gina, one of the things that's interesting about the environmental conversation is it wasn't so very long ago that the narrative around environmental change and policy was, we're going in the right direction. These problems are solvable. People may not remember this, but right up and through the 1990s, people talked about, from Teddy Roosevelt on through in American discourse, that we were actually making positive change. And that seems to, that thread of how Americans see the world and their own natural resources seems to have eroded. What do you think accounts for that?
Well, there's a few things, and if you look at the issue of climate change, we've had, you know, the scientists have been in the driver's seat in talking about it, and I don't know how many scientists you know. They're lovely people, and I listen to them all the time, but they're really hard to understand. You know, they don't speak in the language that most people understand, and so you really have to talk about climate change not as an insurmountable problem or a planetary issue. You have to just boil it down to things that people can do. And remember, climate change isn't something that we've been able to see and feel and taste, like the Cuyahoga River burning. And you've had the fossil fuel companies basically denying climate change and working to get, their brand of scientists out there to tell us it wasn't happening for decades. And now that's undeniable because we can now see the impacts all over the place. The money is now going to denying the solutions. And so I think one of the most important things that we can do is to talk about climate in our everyday life, to write it into scripts. The remarkable changes that we've seen, we sometimes forget. Marriage equality is one, how quickly that happened. Yes, it was a struggle for decades, but I think shows like Will and Grace made a lot of that different. When you see people and get to know them, they're okay. In my day, All in the Family was one of the funniest shows we watched, but the undercurrent of that between Archie and Meathead was raising really important issues like racism, bringing them out and calling them out. Only it ended okay because people got to be people. It was real, normal stories. That's what I'm looking for, and that's why we're here, is to not let the fossil fuel companies tell us it isn't happening or we can't fix it. My frustration is we have so many solutions today, but people are shaking their head going, oh, it's a big deal. What can I do about it? Or they're thinking that the things that we're asking them to do are a sacrifice. And neither is true. Is planting trees hugely bad for you? Do we hate living in cities that actually have green things in them? Or playgrounds? That's actually one of the most important things you can do to protect people from heat stress, especially the elderly, is give us some shade to go in every once in a while. And that's important. Are electric vehicles really that difficult to drive? Have you tried one? They're a motor, they're pretty peppy. You can actually maneuver them, and guess what? They don't need repairs. What's the downside of all of that? As long as we get a government that helps support it so that people who don't have a lot of money can afford to have them. If you look at good light bulbs, now this president is telling us, oh, God forbid we have LED light bulbs. What is that all about?
That's a lighting issue.
Apparently, but I think he had that lighting problem well before LEDs.
Orange is orange.
Yeah, there you go. And
Julia, you know your light as a professional performer.
Yes.
I'm wondering, your commitment to environmental issues goes back. I mean, you've been interested in these issues for a long time, and you've been on the board of NRDC, and you're committed to it. What, being Gina, coming from this field and being you understand her passion. What led you into this realm of activism? Why is this important to you?
For me, it was having children, and it was early on when I was first moved to Los Angeles, and they had beach closures, which struck me as strange, just due to runoff, and because you could get really ill from getting in the ocean, and that didn't make any sense to me. So I became involved actually initially with a local environmental organization, which I very much believe in local activism. I really do, as much as I believe in working with the NRDC. But I think that if you can work in your own backyard, there's great power in that. So that's how it sort of first started. And then I just, I don't know, I bought into it. I mean, I met these people. I've been working with NRDC for decades, in fact, and it's just an enormously gratifying group of people to work with because they're successful at what they do. They win these lawsuits. They have science to back them up, and they're not they're serious people who are committed to very serious people who are committed to this issue, and so therefore I am too. I think they're all heroes, to tell you the truth. I really do. I think, and this is the number one issue for us all, and we must take it on.
Gina, you live what she's talking about. What a lot of what NRDC does is time-consuming, it's arduous, it's filing lawsuits, it's going through appeals, it's working the creaky levers of a vast bureaucracy. But you
sounds really boring.
I know, it sounds dreadful, but I'm getting to the good part, which is that you have a lot of joy about that.
I do.
And one of the things I wanted you to sort of drill into is you have worked for Democrats and Republicans alike, and there are environmentalists of every political stripe. But one thing that has changed in our political ecosystem now is that it's harder to break through. I don't know if that's because each side has its own media, or there's just not as much dialogue across. You have seen that change, and what I'm wondering is, how do you find allies in not the usual places? Because if we're going to get this change done, we're going to have to bring a lot of people on board.
Well, JD, it's a really good question, because that really is the million-dollar question, is having Julia Louis-Dreyfus as a spokesperson for NRDC is terrific. We just need 1,000 more of her. We need every individual out there to start getting active. And so what NRDC is doing is not just focusing on what's going on in Washington, D.C., because frankly, that is depressing. It's not functioning. So you got to go to everywhere else. I mean, in my world and in my life, I believe the best part of my work was done at the local level, because you can't run away from these issues. If you're a mayor, you can't tell everybody, oh, don't worry about it, we'll fix it in 20 years. Or we think it's fake. It's just not, it doesn't work that way. So we're working in cities and local communities to actually move the ball forward, because in the United States, in any democracy, change doesn't happen from the top down. It's driven from the grassroots up. So the real challenge is for us to broaden the base of support, to get activity in every community, to get every state to demand action. And when I get depressed about what's going along in Washington, I look at what's happening in states. There are now 25 states that have said they're going to meet the Paris Accord targets. And they are trying desperately to do that, and we're going to support them every way, because there's things that they can do that actually make for a better world and a better state and a better economy and clean jobs. What's wrong with all those things, right? And those 25 states, now, if you put them together, are the third largest economy in the world, and 55% of the people in this country. So don't tell me I have to worry about the federal government. I went to Paris last week to talk to students and some world leaders. We got together, and I got to talk about the good things that are happening. Because people need to understand that we are in a democracy. It's all about people, not politics. And so if you start demanding action and we start organizing ourselves, like all those buttons, those were organizing buttons. They were saying, I'm not acting as an individual. I'm going to hang out with other people, and we're going to start treating people right. We're going to look at justice and equity, because don't think climate is something of equal importance to every human being or equal impact, because it's not. It's like every other pollutant. It's not an equal opportunity killer. It goes after the young and the old. It goes after people who are disenfranchised. It goes after the poor. It goes after people of color. That's where we have to focus our attention. So if you think climate change isn't a justice issue or an equity issue, you're wrong, which means that if we fix it, we could end up with a more just world. We could end up challenging the inequities of the world and making that better for everybody. And that's the world we have to embrace. And solutions need to impact and better those communities first, so everyone can see that it matters to them and we can fix it. So it's just like everything else. It's building the momentum at the grassroots level and driving change. And 2020 has to be a year of no regrets. We cannot continue like this. We need to demand that the federal government do its job and work for the people. And we have not been adequately motivated through climate change to make that change happen. And that's what it is. So it's not just an environmental issue. Right. This is a human issue. This is a democracy issue. And we can't shove it aside or neglect it. We have our own personal responsibility to do our civic duty and vote, to stand up and talk to our kids and say, we're not leaving you behind, we're not cheating you of your future. And we have to work with other communities and interest groups that would align with us to really want to do something. Women are out there kicking ass. They, because of like us, I'm doing it for my kids and my grandchildren.
Right. Well, women know.
Yeah, there you go. It relates a little bit to the movie you're putting out. I mean, we have a different way of doing things.
So,
I consider it to be better, but
in Julia's movie, there is a moment that you think about, and I mean, I guess the way to think about it is, how do you act in a time of intense crisis? What do you do? And somebody in the movie does the right thing and gathers her children around her, and somebody maybe grabs his cell phone and runs away.
Yes.
And I never thought of it as a metaphor for gender politics, but perhaps it's just a truism that we take our cell phones and run away when the world is coming down on us. But
Well,
hope
I
not.
think, I mean, I do think that is an instinctive, it can be an instinctive reaction, which is to let fear be your guide, and that's the wrong reaction to take. And sometimes it takes a lot of courage to fight, to push against that instinct, doesn't it? But there you go.
I'm trying. I don't have my cell phone with me. One of the things that's interesting about the environmental movement at this moment is, and particularly in the last 2 years, is to see how it is motivating young people,
Yeah.
very young people. And I'm wondering, I mean, obviously you both take hope from that. People worry about, and maybe it's an old-fashioned idea of activism, but I think people, where are the armies of people in the streets? Where's the sustained movement? Are you feeling positively that we can harness these outrages and clearly, I mean, if you talk to a classroom of middle school students, they're already on board.
oh yeah.
They already believe this and want to do something. It's the do something that you must struggle with sometimes. What does that look
Well,
like?
it's doing enough, but yeah, I actually am very hopeful. You know, the young people and their engagement is terrific, and I talk about it and always make sure that it's not because I'm hoping to pass off the responsibility, but because, you know, I remember the 60s and 70s, and we were forcing our parents to focus on these issues. And that's how it often is kids have to teach us. And so I love the idea that they're engaged. What makes me feel absolutely heartbroken is conversations that I have with a lot of young people saying they're questioning whether they should actually have children and whether that's the right thing to do given the future. And that motivates me, because I can't ever think that my children or grandchildren would have that thought in their head. We just can't let that happen. And so I'm excited about young people involved. I'm excited, you know, that a lot of women are engaged. I think it's a moment to bring together a lot of different community groups. And, you know, one of my favorite exercises when I give a lot of speeches, I go to a lot of colleges because I love young people. If you get depressed, go there, because there's no questions when you go there. They're all excited and they're filled with energy. And in the end, I tell them, please don't come to my speech again unless you vote next time, because I'm sure half of them don't. So that's one message. But I always tell them that when you come across a climate denier, you know, don't go through some long dissertation about the science. Just tell them 3 things. Number 1, that climate change is real. Number 2, man-made emissions have caused it. And number 3, that's why women need to rule the world. And I firmly believe all 3 of those things.
You both have an instinctive sense of urgency
do.
about getting involved. And just to shift a little bit from policy, where do you think that comes from for both of you? Why are you motivated to jump in when so many other people aren't? And you drag some of us with you when you do that.
God, I don't
Good
know.
question,
It's a good
huh?
question. I got to think about this. I wonder if my therapist is in the room by any chance. You know, actually, in my family growing up, actually all of my parents, but particularly my stepfather, with whom I lived most of the time, and my mom, worked. He did a lot of. He was a doctor, and he worked for an organization called the Hope Ship. And we traveled all over the world and lived in Sri Lanka and Tunisia and Colombia, and in which he was teaching young doctors there modern techniques of the time, et cetera, et cetera. He's a thoracic surgeon. And so there was a culture, I should say, in my family, and also with my dad as well, of giving back. And it's not just giving back, pardon me. It's a feeling of being linked to your community, that you are very much your neighbor's keeper. And that was important. That was an important sort of fundamental that wasn't really discussed as directly as I'm discussing it right now, but it was just part of the action. And so, I don't know, it's given me, and I think actually as I've gotten sort of become more of a well-known actress, I've felt a certain responsibility because, as Norman Lear once said, celebrity is something you spend. And so I thought, well, I need to spend this on something of worth. And this seems quite worthwhile. And I feel guilty. Guilt is a great motivator for me anyway, but that's a whole other problem. But anyway, but it is, in fact. I feel guilty if I don't, and if I don't rise to the occasion as much as I can. You know, I'm not doing what this hero next to me is doing, but I'm here to support as much as I humanly can. Yeah. What about you?
What about me? People do ask you that. I really don't know why, other than, one of my undergraduate degree in college was in cultural anthropology, and basically it was the study of primitive societies. So I tell everyone that that's probably why I did really good in government. But really, the truth is that it really taught me to love diversity. I like differing opinions. I'm not afraid of them. I think that in the end, it's all getting back to what binds us together as human beings, what our values are. And if you can get through the arguments to understand why people are afraid, why people don't like change, you can forge partnerships moving forward. And I love that. I enjoy people. I don't worry if they don't think like me. I feel like when you're in government, your job is not to make people all the same. It's to look at what keeps us together and to make things happen. So I was always a fixer. If people couldn't fix disagreements, I got in and had to do some work on it, and I love that.
Is there an example in your life, a specific example in which you really were butting heads with somebody, and then you were? Can you cite an example for us?
Yeah, a bunch of them.
Yeah.
I'll give you one of my earliest ones that was a lesson for me. I was working as the health agent in the town of Canton, Massachusetts, a town of 20,000, right when all the environmental regulations were coming into being. So I had to do restaurant inspections, housing inspections, sewer inspections, tell whether the water quality was good or bad for the town, and look at industries and chemical storage. I knew nothing about any of that. I went to school as environmental engineering, but they don't teach you how to inspect Chinese restaurants. How do I know what I'm looking for?
Right.
And doing all this stuff. So you learn by the seat of your pants. But one of the things I really wanted to do was to do something in the town that basically looked at making sure that chemicals were stored properly, because there had been incidences where they weren't. And there was no right to know law then. There was no labeling requirements. And it wasn't a big industrial town, but we had some industry. So I wanted to do this bylaw to actually make companies label and tell everybody what they stored there. And I knew that I was going to get crushed when it went to town meeting, because we had this town meeting and nobody does anything, right? That's sort of the normal status for most communities. And so what I realized I could do was to buy a computer for the fire department, and basically make the fire department understand that if this bylaw went through, when fire departments were going to respond in a fire, they'd know how to respond to it, what chemicals were there, whether they were going to get injured if they put water on it when it should be foam. And when town meeting came up, it was loaded with every fireman in the town lined up along the outside and watched who voted for it and who didn't. Lo and behold, unanimous. It passed.
Wow.
That's when I'm saying to myself, who cares about something? How do I get the naysayers to go out of the way and get something reasonable that I'm asking, but they still don't want it? But you bring somebody in that has a vested interest and can drive that decision. And that's always the case. There's always going to be people fighting change. But you've got to find the people who understand and embrace it and have them explain why it matters to them and why it ought to matter to somebody else. Because change is hard. People vote for every politician that says they want to change anything. And then as soon as anything change is proposed, they're voting against it. You know, and you just got to realize that there's ways to motivate and move things forward.
When you look at constituencies now, both nationally and in all the states you work, I mean, we're here in a state that tends to vote one way. I would say this is a very environmentally progressive community, very close to nature. You come from a state that votes another way, that is also environmentally minded.
Yep.
One of the things that must be challenging is when you look at the populations often, not always, who are directly perhaps affected by a lot of environmental hardship, whether that's runoff from coal mines or
Environmental justice
environmental,
communities.
and yes,
Is what you're talking about.
that they're not necessarily at the forefront or in their perception at the forefront of this movement. So how do you talk to people or make them the leaders of the movement that is in there?
NRDC does tons of work in environmental justice communities all the time. They're there to support them. Right? Don't you
That's
agree?
right.
I mean, not in with water quality issues, with industrial waste, with communities that are around port towns, even bus depots, so on and so forth, where the effects, and these are obviously underprivileged communities for the most part, and the effects of these pollutants are on so many levels devastating their communities. And so NRDC has been able to, with great success, identify so many, hundreds of those communities across the United States, actually even internationally, and helping them to bring them up and so that they can protect themselves with, understanding the law and helping them out from a legal point of view as well.
And the key that Julia just mentioned is it's helping them help themselves.
Right.
And that's the lesson that I think we had to learn, is that everybody has to learn, is that every community needs to be in charge of their own destiny. They're not looking for us to define what should happen. They're looking for our support to give them a voice, to allow every community to speak up and say what they want and what they need. And so I spent an awful lot of time on these issues, and really it's just all about remembering that government is to give voice to those that don't have it. It's to protect your rights when others are infringing on it and you need government to settle it. And so there's every opportunity, I think, to build really good bridges among communities and within communities to get actions that happen that they want and they need, and to give them the power to get it. And NRDC is not going to go in and tell communities what they need. We're going to go to communities in need and ask them how we can help. And when you do it that way, change happens. And when you do it that way, you build constituencies.
Your natural constituencies touch every class of person in this country, from people in Appalachia to people on the Upper West Side, who all, in some way or another, are touched by the environment that we live in.
Yeah.
The world we live in now, though, tends to cartoon people into constituencies. And sometimes people have wrongly identified people on this side of the argument as having, as you just underscored, there's nothing elitist about wanting clean water. That message, that storytelling, though, seems to have powerful resonance with people, and that's, I'm sure, for you deeply frustrating, and probably what led you to let's tell a better story. Talk a little bit about how you came to that conclusion. Like, we gotta rewrite the script. We've got to talk to people in ways that they're going to really hear.
Well, probably for years of failure. That does it. It sends you a signal. I just felt like I have always been about trying to communicate. When you work at the local level, you live or die by communicating effectively. And so I worked at the local level, and I worked for the state level, and I worked for 6 governors. I was actually appointed by Governor Dukakis for the first time when I went to the state. If you remember him, he ran and lost for president. And I left Massachusetts during the Romney administration. If you remember, he ran for president. He lost. There may be a common theme here.
Trend there.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't work for anybody anymore. And you know, you realize that they were Republicans, but they didn't relish the thought of having dirty water or unclean air and having to deal with that. And so you just got to get it down to that level of understanding. And so the challenge with climate is it's just been way too aloof, way too far away, not understandable. And I think that climate change is the biggest public health challenge of our time. And it also could be the most incredible opportunity of our time. There's going to be huge amounts of money invested in climate change, because if we don't, there'll be multiple huge investments in fixing things after the fact. And if we work together, we can figure out how to make people's lives better and healthier. And the common thing that I think for everybody is they care about their families, they care about their kids. And we have to get it down to that level and tell them, if you do, which of course you do, let's figure it out.
And you feel equally galvanized by that message, obviously. You are on board to tell as many stories as you can that can turn the corner.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's get it done.
Easy peasy.
Easy peasy.
Rewrite the future.
I'm going to ask one last question, which is to Gina. If you could tell these folks in this room a couple of key things that they can do, because you can't leave here and go back and look at YouTube or whatever you people do. You have to take some positive steps, like she does. She makes us all want to just reach up and do a little bit more. So give people some tangible things they can do.
Oh, I got lots of them. Should
She got a long list.
Should I
The
pull out a
scroll's
list of
coming out.
100 things? You know, first of all, talk to your kids about climate change and work with them. Get them to work. You work in their schools. Get them to put a solar panel on top of the schools and talk about it. Make sure that if you have renewable energy that you can sign up for, do that. Shop your fridge. Make sure you don't waste food. 40% of our food gets wasted. That's a disgrace. It's also a climate problem. Try to reduce your intake of red meat if you can. Keep your thermostats low. Keep your LEDs high. And lastly, you know, think about the way you move around in the world. You know, minimalize your use of cars if you can. If you can afford an electric vehicle, buy one. If you can't take public transportation, talk to your local community, vote all the time, bug the hell out of them to make your community healthier, plant trees, care about senior citizens that live in your area, check on them when the heat gets high because they wither, and make sure that when 2020 rolls around as it is today and the time goes on, work with your own community on demanding action. It's the only way that we're going to get an election that we all care about to go the way we want. And it's the only way that we're going to make the actions in Washington, D.C. stop from being nonsense partisan politics into working for all of us. And so work with your community and make things happen.
So some good advice from the leader of the greatest environmental organization that ever existed in any dimension. They actually have pledge cards next door, little things where you can write down a commitment. I did 3 of them, so you can do 1, and just take a little action. You'll feel better. You really will. Thank you so much, and go see Downhill. It's hilarious.